All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Break the Rules live stream. I am your host, Lev Polyakov, and we are here today with a star-studded panel talking about something extremely important right now, which is what exactly is President Donald Trump going to be doing regarding the war in Ukraine that Russia's been instigating these several years right now. We have people here like Vish Burra, who works under Steve Bannon. We have Joseph Lindsley back with us today, who is in Ukraine right now, and he's been dodging like actual bombs from the drones. They were just like right outside. I was hearing those bombs as well. So
I mean, JP's a hero. I just want to add this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Vlad, good friend of the show, senior fellow of the Atlantic Council here. It's great to see you again. And good friend Armand back with us from San Francisco. So, guys, we are going to start this off from Joseph just giving a lay of the land as far as what exactly has been happening. From what you were able to see with these various deals that are in the works between Trump and Ukraine and Russia. And is this a sign that Trump and company, and Musk are going into more of this Chinese sphere of influence, Russian-Chinese sphere of influence? Or what exactly are we seeing here? And once again, everybody who is listening to this, make sure you go into the Jumbotron and go into the YouTube for all the people who are listening in Spaces right now. I have it plugged into the Jumbotron right here, right now, because this is a simultaneous X Spaces and YouTube stream. Be sure to subscribe, like the video, share, click the bell. All of this helps. Anyway, Joseph, you have the floor.
Yeah, good evening, Lev. Thanks for bringing all of us together here. And I talk to you from Kyiv right now, and as some of you heard during the sound check, we are under a pretty intense barrage of the Iranian-made, Iranian-designed Shahed drones are here in Kyiv City, and you can hear the at times, even just about 5 minutes ago, we could hear the anti-aircraft. I'm sorry, the anti-drone missile air defense going off. And what's interesting with these Shahed drones from Iran. They sound like lawnmowers, which you can hear it coming. And I didn't really appreciate that until a few weeks ago when I was in Kharkiv, Ukraine, 30 miles from Russia. The Russians are now using a new silent drone in Kharkiv, and you can't hear it. And I strangely found myself missing the Iranian drones because at least you know how close it is to you, and you can say, okay, now it's time to run to the corridor, as I did during our sound check. During a pretty explosive night, and it's definitely continuing here. And I'll say, firstly, if you read a lot of the headlines in the past weeks, but even going back to the election of Donald Trump, big media was saying, "Oh, panic in Kyiv." I don't ever see panic in Kyiv. I've never seen panic in Kyiv. I think that's why Kyiv is still strong and free. And as an example of that, I was at one major tech conference this week, and also in a tech investor conference, a smaller one. And I was really struck by, during all the panel conversations and bomb shelters, that no one, if these were conferences in Washington, everyone would be focused on what Trump had said or how Boris Johnson, or Keir Starmer responded, and everyone was just deadly serious, focused on talking about their work. The technology that they're improving and adapting with drones and other mechanisms to win the war, and it's such a calm sense of focus here. And in fact, I ran into General Petraeus, who not always agreed with on things, but General Petraeus, retired American general, was here, and he said to me afterward, he said that was the most. I don't know him, but he just told me. He said that was the most extraordinary conference I've ever been to in my entire life. Because you're in a city that's often under attack, and yet to see this incredible innovation happening here, and such an incredible spirit of that can-do American mentality. And I agreed with the general, because as I was walking through the conference hall, looking at the different exhibits of drones and weapons, even by people of all different ages and from different backgrounds, I said, if people close to Elon Musk came here and were to witness this, they would have a come to Jesus moment. They would say, these are our favorite people. These are the people we want to be with in this scary world dealing with China, or especially as we work to reform the waste in the Pentagon, because Ukrainians, and we can go into this now or in future times, but like Ukrainians have put to shame the American defense industry, and I've seen it. I've seen the visceral anger of American defense contractors when they come here because Ukrainians for $3,000 or sometimes $700 can make something that's more effective, more lethal, more useful than something that's $50,000 or $200,000 sold by the DoD. And so at this conference, you really could see that come alive here. And I think that's part of the this is the last thing I'll say in this intro, and turn it to you guys. But when I look at, like, okay, fine, if you want to oppose Ukraine for some reason, but when there's this, ignoring what Ukraine is in your opposition to it, I think that's really what I find very frustrating. I think a lot of Ukrainians do. And for example, Elon Musk retweeted Donald Trump Jr. Maybe 2 hours ago, talking about the landscape in Ukraine, that everything's a failure here, and that's just not the reality. In fact, I wrote a piece at The Hill, the newspaper in Washington, thehill.com, is sort of the briefing that I wish the White House had about Ukraine, to know about Ukraine's strengths, because the legacy media doesn't tell this story. They're not sharp. They're not good about it. They're very good at talking about the disasters, the disaster porn, but they're not good at talking about the successes. And so just as a teaser, one example, the fact that I'm talking to you from Kyiv, even under, Iranian drones, by the way, Iranian drones over Europe, we have electricity. And if you go back, all of the experts, the big military experts, the fancy think tanks, the BBC, the Economist, last fall, everyone said Ukraine was going to be back in the Middle Ages this winter, that we would have no electricity, probably no water. And guess what? That's not the case. This is Russia's third annual failed winter offensive. Like, we're still here. But my problem with the media is they never step back and say, oh, wait, and the experts, they never say, oh, wait a second, our predictions were wrong. Because the absence of a problem is hard to make into a headline. Like, oh, Kyiv has electricity today, and today, and today, and now the winter's almost over, and no one reports on that. And this is a problem because I know that I have friends in the White House, like, they don't know this. And so when they go into trying to negotiate with Russia, they really just don't know anything about Ukraine's strong points and how much better it is here than it was in 2022. And I'll say, whether you're in Kyiv, here in the capital, or in that city of Kharkiv, my favorite city in the world because it's the most inspiring entrepreneurial place, like, statistically, you're safer than you would be in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, because Ukrainians have a nice society. There's not crime on the streets. This is what kills me. Like, Americans would love this place and at least want to appreciate it. And so even if you don't want to send weapons, because America's not really sending big money, it's mainly weapons. Even if you don't want to send old American weapons, at least don't shit on this country. And but what I see right now is like Elon and Donald Trump Jr., everyone, sort of attacking this country horribly. And if you look at J.D. Vance's speech in Munich, everything he said in that speech was right about Europe, the rest of Europe. But there's a country in Europe that's actually willing to fight, bleeding for freedom, that actually is the country that he was dreaming of in that speech, and that's Ukraine. And I hope people start to see that.
Now, Vish, when it comes to the consensus from more of the MAGA base, since you are associated with it, would you be able to think of what exactly would be their reply to a statement like Joseph made right now? Because he was talking about how similar Ukraine is in many aspects to the ideal of a lot of people who want to make America great again, but at the same time, they also have a lot of apprehensions about it. I wonder how much of that is also from wanting to own the libs, where support from Ukraine has been associated with that whole thing. But I don't know, Vish, can you give me your take on this? What do you think is going on?
I just don't understand why we have to pay for it. I don't know why it has to be our taxpayer dollars that have to fund this war, this effort to bring about this ideal nation from Vance's speech. First of all, is the place nice? Does it have no problems? No, right? That's why we're sending money over to fight this war. But JP over here is basically saying, no, everything's fine. It's great, actually. You should come visit. Again, why are we sending the money? So I think that there's an issue in just, is it nice? Is it not? Is it ideal? Is the war real? Okay, yeah, we can accept that the war is real. Putin did make a move. I get all that. But where are you now? After 4 years and after something like $200 to $300 billion from the U.S., which Zelensky's gone on record to say that I only ever received half of that. So what happened to the other half? And that's our money, and we have a right to ask, and we're not getting a straight answer. And there's no end use monitoring on any of the stuff we send there. Forget the money. So without the transparency that we expect from ideal republics and ideal democracies from Ukraine, and not even elections, like, can we ask for elections? Apparently that's a big scandal. These are the things that need to be resolved if you're going to talk about this is an ideal democracy that we should be dumping trillions of dollars into. And in fact, I think that the dumping of cold hard cash into Ukraine has only kind of delayed the inevitable at the expense of America. And I think that we just can't afford it anymore. There's so many things that we can't afford anymore. And the Ukraine war is certainly not one of them, before we even start talking about NATO as a whole. And
Vlad, sorry. I see Vlad wants to respond. Oh, you're muted, Vlad. Unmute yourself and stream you. There we go, buddy.
Can I be heard on both?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
We're good.
So, immense respect to a gentleman such as Vish Burra. Before we all start arguing about whether this is good for the American taxpayer, whether this is good for American interests in the world, whether this is good for our defense of Europe, whether this is good in terms of our policy and position in Southeast Asia, deterring the Russians, deterring the Chinese, deterring the Iranians. We all have good answers to that. JP will have good answers to that. Maybe Armand will have good answers to that. Certainly you do. I do. Before we get to that, and I think it's absolutely critical that we have an honest conversation with a serious guy like Vish, who talks to and for a lot of people who, frankly, don't have as much skin in the game as JP and I do, having family there, having been on the front lines. My ancestors are from there. My first wife is from there. My relatives, I have 15 friends who died on the front lines. I have skin in the game, and I'm diaspora. I'm a local. I understand why a gentleman like Vish might not be as concerned about this country as I am, or Joseph is, right? But before we do that, which we will, I'd like to just start going back to where we are vis-a-vis negotiations over the last week. I wrote an article with my friend and colleague, Mr. Mark Gagliardi, who's the greatest Russia expert in the English language world, I think, on heavyweight ruling champion in that category. We put out a piece yesterday, which I've gotten a lot of flack for as a Ukrainian patriot from everybody I know for not being anti-Trump enough. Before we discuss why this is important and why Vish should maybe understand why this is good for Americans and ordinary Americans, let's get to where we are over the last 5 days, right?
Wait, okay? Vlad, can I interject? Can I interject on one quick thing? Because I might have to go in a minute because I hear. I'm sorry, the shit is getting closer. But one quick thing: 2024 and 2023 were record years for sales of American weapons. America's not losing money here at all, and I just want to say that point. That's very crucial. The American defense industry, and I think actually the defense industry doesn't want a quick victory here. They want a long war because they make a lot of money. But to say that America's losing money here is flat out wrong. It's a very clear point I want to say quickly. If it has to be my last words on this earth, I give it back to you, Vlad.
That's great, man. And you're in the eye of the storm, so.
Yeah, he's going to be around, but I mean, this is real. This is actually happening right now, where his life is in danger. But yeah, we all understand that. But anyway, Vlad, go on.
He's a hero. I've been on a zillion podcasts and TV shows where I had to say, "Oh, I'm sorry if they're coming after me in Kiev and Odessa." It's happened to the best of us. So before we get into the why, what is it good for? War, what is it good for? Who's it good for? Who are we protecting? How much does it cost? Let's just get to Donald Trump's audacious and kind of brutal and unsentimental and rather savage and rather performatively efficient and it works, the brutal form of communication, so and negotiation. So what Donald Trump has done is try to brute force the stalemate and equilibrium that we've had on the lines, on the передовая, on the front lines, and to try to force both sides into making a deal. The Ukrainians are very happy to make a deal, and they would love to make a deal because we're bleeding to death. We just don't have the manpower, and it's been 3 years. And even though the electricity is still on, they've destroyed, by the Russians, I mean, destroyed 70% of the electricity and the electrical capacity of the country. And if they weren't so adverse to bombing nuclear power plants, which they are, they would have probably gotten rid of 100% by now. So the electrical, hydrogen, wind, whatever power generating plants in Ukraine have been blown up, or the transistors connecting them to the electrical grid have been blown up. The reason the Ukrainians still have electricity, and JP can join us from Kiev, is that you can't really bomb nuclear power plants, because otherwise you get nuclear explosions all across Europe, close enough to the Russian border that it concerns them, right? So the situation is pretty bad, and it could get worse. The Ukrainians are winning because they're still here 1,000 days into the war, but they want a deal. Donald Trump came into power saying that we will have a deal, and that I will fix this, and I will have negotiations. Donald Trump has no particular emotional attachment to the Ukrainians. We know this. Donald Trump doesn't like the Ukrainians. There are reasons for this. I've written about this ad nauseum in my column in Tablet in Foreign Policy. Donald Trump wants a deal for his own interests. Donald Trump both wants a Nobel Prize. He wants Americans to keep the Europeans in on this, and to have them shoulder the burden. He wants Europeans to pay for this, and from American standpoint, why not? He wants also this to go away so that he could concentrate on major deals and or confrontations with the Chinese. So this is in his schema of things to do. This is a big problem that needs to go away. And from this standpoint, the deal is happening. He's put his shoulder to the wheel, and he's going to try to make a deal. That said, he is putting a lot of pressure on the Russians now, and not so much pressure on the Ukrainians. So that's where we are right now.
Wait, I think I understand, but the problem that Vish pointed out is that America has spent all of this money for defending Ukraine, and he doesn't really see it being worth it in the end if Russia's just going to be so tough that it's going to steamroll over Ukraine in maybe in a few years, but still that's going to be inevitable in the mind of a lot of people who are supporter of Donald Trump. Number one, is that true? And number two, if that is true, what would be, I'm sure a guy that a lot of us like, Thomas Sowell, always said, that there's no solution, there's only trade-offs. So the question here is, okay, if we assume the worst, what is going to be the trade-off here of having Ukraine be a part of Russia in the long term, not just for Europe, but also for the United States? But we're going to get into that eventually. But any thoughts on
just
the...
very quickly, I'm going to just very quickly, because I'll let somebody else talk, just to answer the first question to you and to Vish. In fact, the Americans didn't give enough support in order to let the Ukrainians win. The Biden administration was doing and thinking what Donald Trump is saying openly. The Biden administration did not want a Ukrainian victory. They did not want a Russian defeat. They did not want Russia to collapse. They didn't want loose nukes. They didn't want civil wars. They didn't want all sorts of problems that they foresaw that they would not be able to control with an uncontrolled Russian defeat on the battlefield. So the Biden administration brought us to this situation by grinding this war out and extending this war unnecessarily. Despite all that, the Ukrainians have done tremendous good for American interests in the world by deterring the Russians, deterring the Chinese, deterring the Iranians from going even further in destroying the American-led world order and the system of governance and security that we've set up since World War II. By we, I mean all of us, Europeans, Americans, Canadians, Japanese. And if we're just going to talk about, just to answer Vish, dollar for dollar, first of all, you've destroyed 50 to 60% of the Russian capacity to fight for the next 10 years at 5% of American, 5 to 7% of American defense spending. It's a bargain. Pennies on the dollar, right? It's a bargain. The entire world is watching what we can do with our military technology. We are selling weapons. I mean, I don't want to be talking like this. I don't have any shares in Northrop Grumman or like Lockheed
Raytheon. Yeah.
or Raytheon. I have no shares in Raytheon. But if I have to talk in this language, which I find disgusting and which 15, 16-year-old peacenik me would find disgusting 25 years later, I'm sitting here defending the role of the military-industrial complex. We are making the world safer for our European allies and selling weapons to the Israelis, to the Arabs, to the Africans, to the Eastern Europeans, to the Western Europeans, because they see that our weapons are the best in the world and 5 generations more advanced than anybody else's. We have debased the Russian military-industrial complex. We've taken out 50 to 60% of our capacity to wage war, and we've deterred our revisionist opponents in the world, and I think it's worth the money. So we're just talking about dollars and cents. That's my answer to Mr. Burra.
Before I bring things to Joseph as well as Armand, who has not had a chance to speak yet, I do want to ask this of Vish. When it comes to the figure that Vlad was talking about right now, 5 to 7% of the U.S.'s military budget going into something that was able to deal such a heavy blow to Russia, would that not change the view that maybe people in MAGA have of Russia being this overwhelmingly superior force that is destined to win?
I mean, I think that Americans don't really care, to be quite honest. Dollar for dollar, I understand that, depending on how you quantify the innovations in weapons and all that, and dollar for dollar, if that's the, if that's the positive there, okay, that's fine. I don't know if that's still helping America. I don't know if when you say it's worth it for Americans to send the money over, but why? What is the material change in Americans' lives that can be pointed to by sending this money to continue to fund the Ukraine war?
Well, this is the big question, and here's how I could break it down before we continue. If we're talking about something like Doge, where all of these government bureaucrats end up getting, out of their positions, I could see a lot of money being saved for the Americans, and that is a positive thing. Now, if you were the average American, let's say Vish, and you are anything but average, but if you imagine yourself as the average American, and all of a sudden there has been this peace deal that has concluded between Trump and Russia, and they're working closer together, and Trump's visiting them on May Day and whatever, if you see that reality, can you imagine the reality like 2 years from now and 3 years and 4 years from now as far as what Russia ends up doing and being on the world stage from that point on, from the point on that they made this theoretical deal and Ukraine ends up getting screwed, but who cares? Like, just imagine that as the average American, what are you going to be seeing on your TV and internet from that point on?
Well, I don't think we would see anything much different. In fact, I think that there's a lot of ground to make up with Russia. I think that the visit on Victory Day by Trump that was announced, I think that's very symbolic. I think that it does point to this fact that, after World War II, we turned our back on Russia after they did help us defeat the Nazis. And I think that there is some good faith effort that is trying to be made by Trump, not just on, kind of the short-term political basis, but also on the long-term path for America itself. Clearly the world order that America has established right now has led us to this point in the first place. And so I think that there needs to be a serious conversation about what part of that world order and how it's structured is worth keeping, and what do we have to change or restructure or get rid of. And so I think that just to kind of put a lid on this thing, I think that on a couple of different levels, whether it's geopolitical relationship, not just for the short term and the long term. I think that for a dollar for dollar, the material change, question as to why this is positive for the Americans contributing to this effort. And then also, lest we not forget, to Vlad's point when he's talking about how the Biden administration wanted to see Ukraine lose the war effort or not really do what they wanted to do or wanted what Trump wanted, but accept privately and behind the scenes. I would respond then why did Zelensky go to Pennsylvania to campaign with the Democrats, right? And so I think
Vlad's got a response there.
I just want to answer that. That was a total screw up, and I discussed that with members of his administration. So here's the thing. There's a very brief question. He's not a Democrat in any way.
That's not the point.
That was a major screw up, and the Madam Ambassador of the Ukrainian administration, Washington D.C., caught a lot of shit for that. That was a major political screw up, and that the presidential administration, Bankova, just had bad information about what they should do. The people in Kiev in the presidential administration made a dumb decision, and they know very well, and they ate a lot of shit for that. So. That's completely legitimate. I just want to say that to you.
I want to make sure we get to the heart of the issue here, though. The reason why I asked Vish the question of what would the average American be seeing is specifically regarding Russia itself. Because one image that I think a lot of people within the MAGA movement have of Russia is this misunderstood creature that eventually, if America makes peace with it, maybe we'll take it away from China's grasp. It'll become like this, good trading partner and good neighbor, and everybody's going to be in peace, singing Kumbaya. I don't know. Is that the image of Russia that you're going to be seeing in the years to come? And if it's not, if there is still this idea of, Russia's probably going to, try to take these other countries, then where exactly is that going to stop? And you see where I'm going with this, right, Vish?
I do understand that. And look, I think that growing up in New York City with as many Russians as I've grown up around, I feel like, listen, if they have their own space, the Brighton beaches and the sheep's heads of the world, it's not
I'm from there, bro.
Huh? Yeah,
I'm from there, bro.
Yeah, look, I'm saying, look, you guys want to run your card games, you want whatever you want to do, it's fine, right? And if we can trade on something, that's fine. Usually, not the worst business people on earth. Actually, they have some business acumen. But would I leave my daughter to be babysitted by one of these guys? Probably not, right? And so I think that if there's a geopolitical understanding to that, it's, look, we respect Russia as a country with real civilizational roots and a real history and a culture and a real empire level civilization. I think that it would be definitely a better strategy for us to try to show them some love to get them away from China, even if it doesn't necessarily work. And because we need to be able to say that we tried, which is the big trump card that I think Putin and Russia have on us right now, is that he, especially if you look back at his Tucker interview, and he says, I came in as the optimist. I wanted to make a deal with every president that walked through the White House, and they all told me that they would work with me, but then the apparatus underneath them told me to fuck off, right? And so that's what's bitter. That's what's made my view on this, all bitter. And that's why you can't trust the United States, because they promise you one thing and do another, or tell you they can't do something. And this is a problem this systemic problem of a lack of integrity through our institutions and our bureaucracy and all that. It's killing us here too. And that's what, and so, I want to see an end to that bureaucracy, as Lev, you've pointed out. Yeah, I want to see, the budget saved on that end, make some of these bureaucrats go away, save that money. But a big part of that effort is, that those 8% budget cuts to the Pentagon as well. You want to talk about it's only a couple percentage points of our defense budget that costs us to take on Russia via funding Ukraine. Well, I'd love to cut those points out anyway, right? That's what the mentality already is. And so as many of those points that we can shave off with by getting rid of unnecessary expenditures that don't actually benefit our people materially in a way that they're clamoring for it right now, then that's what we have to do. And if that means that we have to brute force that deal between Russia and Ukraine to get it to stop in its tracks, and whatever the lines are, right? I think that is what MAGA wants most, is just an end to it, stop the money flow. And it's not our fault. It's not our fault that Kyiv made a big mistake in sending Zelensky to Pennsylvania, because Donald Trump, during a summer that he got shot at, is going to remember who was on his side and who wasn't. And that's the big problem that now you're dealing with on a straight up personal level. And so unless you can crack that code, there is not much runway here left for Ukraine.
Yeah, the personal stuff is... Joseph, the personal stuff I completely understand, and I really want to make sure that we focus on the heart of this whole thing, which is whether or not Russia is actually going to expand after any kind of peace deal, whether that peace deal would be similar to the Budapest Memorandum, where they promised to not go into Ukraine, in exchange for Ukraine getting rid of its nukes. So to me, the only quick comparison I would make here is that I understand that you're coming from a good place, Vish, that you have maybe more faith in Russia. To me, I see it as like one of these white BLM supporters, going to a bunch of these BLM dudes saying like, yeah, we could all get along, come over to my apartment, we'll hang out, we'll have a party, I am for, the Black Liberation Front and all of that. That's kind of how I see a lot of Republicans when it comes to Russia, because maybe they see Russian people and they think, oh, they're just white people, they're like these nice, reasonable Europeans with a civilization, they'll listen to reason. Why would they want China? But anyway,
no. I'm not under that. I'm not under that that kind of spell.
So you have a bit of a distrust of the Ruskies then. That's good. But, yes.
Could I speak up?
Please go ahead, my brother.
Yeah, I'm trying to. All right, so just like a couple things. First, like to get some factual things out of the way, it's like fundamentally when Zelensky said that, oh, this money has gone missing or whatever, that's not what he said. If you look at the context of what he said in the full sentence, what he said is that the majority of the money is not being spent in Ukraine, which is absolutely true. About 86% of all the money that was like aid to Ukraine was spent on United States weapons, United States service members. Even some of the humanitarian aid was paying for things that were bought in the United States and then sent over there. And a huge chunk of it is just an accounting thing, because we're sending them old equipment that's going to be like either thrown out or put away that was not being in use because we're upgrading to new equipment and giving it them there. But I also and then this whole thing with the Zelensky thing, he wasn't campaigning with Democrats. He went to a factory which is building weapons for use in Ukraine and said thank you to the troops. I do think 100%, not the troops, the good people making it. I do think it was a mistake. They didn't understand the U.S. political environment. But if you really think it's like, I don't know, I would question my moral principles and the sort of leader I follow if he said, oh, well, I felt personally insulted, so I'm going to make decisions about the lives of millions of people. But I actually think like this whole conversation has been really illustrative of the point of, like, Vlad and JP are trying to make arguments with the assumption that it is in the benefit of the United States to weaken Russia. And I think Vish and a lot of MAGA world fundamentally don't see it that way. And I don't think necessarily that all of them are like, wow, Russia's amazing and so great. I think it's more of there are those people, we see them all the time online, although how many of those people work for the Russians? Actually, who knows? Like, I remember I had many encounters of people where I was like, arguing with them and they're like, I am the Texan from such and such, but they like spell color for you and like talk about warm water ports. It's very strange. But I think that's a fundamental divide. Like, I personally think is it in the interests of the United States to limit the power of Russia in Europe. First of all, because like they have consistently violated any agreements they've had in the past, especially under Putin, the agreement after the Soviet Union, where they'd say we wouldn't, intervene if you give up your nukes. They violated that. Under Obama, when there was the first like little green men that were sent from Ukraine sent from Russia into Ukraine, where they set up independent republics and so on. That was a violation of agreement. Then they continued to do so with the invasion of Ukraine later. And so fundamentally, I think part of the weakness in negotiating strategy is there's a real desire on part of like Donald Trump and the administration to just like cut a deal and put things behind them. But part of the issue is that Russia has fundamentally never been, and in particular under Putin, like a good faith partner. And nobody in Eastern Europe is under any delusion that when this deal is cut, Russia will just like quietly be like, okay, that's done. That's it. That's how it is. But I think part of it is that there are folks in the Trump administration who don't really care. Part of like what's been surprising to me, but now it's coming into more scope, is I think there's maybe Vish can confirm that to me, a sense of like that spheres of influence doctrine should come back, right? Like the United States is like saying to Canada that we're going to make you the 51st state, and like we're going to send troops to Mexico, and we're bringing back Panama. It's like this sense that like, and you kind of alluded to it, it's a civilization with like empire status and so on, is like there's a sense that great powers around the world can have authority to control their regions, and then they stay out of each other's business. I disagree with that, because I think that part of like the post-World War II consensus that prevented a third World War is a sense that like you should not be invading and annexing neighboring countries anymore. And that helped prevent large-scale conflicts. Part of like the big thing in 1991 when Iraq invaded Kuwait, there was like a huge shift, was that the UN stepped in and said like you can't invade and annex your neighbors. That consensus has started to chip away, and it's very clear that like that's not something really Trump believes in. He wants like more territory. And I personally, I think that's like the major reason, putting aside any sentimental stuff, is like why we should have been in supporting Ukraine and prevented that, is because I think a world in which countries go back to like, I can invade my neighbors if they're weak and take their territory, is going to cause a lot of conflict. But I guess like stepping back, I think it's just a fundamental perception of, do you see Russia as an adversary who undermines the interests of the United States? Or do you see them not just as an ally, but a regional power that should be able to do what it wants in its region, as long as they let us do what we want in our region and we like, stay apart?
Yeah, Vish, any thoughts there? And Armand, your webcam is a little bit blurry sometimes, but
Sorry,
sorry.
My office is like in a state of mass, so I have to use the computer camera.
No problem. Vish, any thoughts on what Armand said? I'm going to go to Joseph.
Yeah. To the first point that I wanted to touch on, where he came to, where Zelensky came to Pennsylvania, you had mentioned that, well, actually this money wasn't lost. It mostly went back to the United States and weapons purchases and stuff like that. And that's why Zelensky was there in Pennsylvania. He was there to say thank you. I get that, but this is exactly the machine that MAGA wants to stop, right? We are very much against the military-industrial complex and this flow of cash from the taxpayer pool to weapons manufacturers, or to Ukraine first and then weapons manufacturers back in the U.S. That is a system we've been against from the very beginning, so it shouldn't shock you that doesn't move us either, right? And so that's, I think, one point that I do want to make is we're just kind of tired of this whole idea of cash going overseas and then finding their way back to some, I get it was a factory in Pennsylvania, but in reality, if there's even that much money being spent, you don't think more Americans would be happier if that was really ending up in their pockets? It's probably not, or at least not at the scale that it should be, based on what
money didn't go, like the dollars I was referring to, the 86% were paid directly to Americans, right? It's not like we give Ukraine money to buy weapons. We like buy the weapons and give it to them.
I get that, but in this context, and we end up with Donald Trump at the end of this formula, I don't know if it bought you enough voters, right? Based on that basis. Yeah. And so there's that. The other point too, when you're talking about, I don't know how I feel about leaders who base their decision making about geopolitical stuff on like personal slights or personal issues and stuff like that. I hate to tell you, to be the first one to say, you know, you're going to be very disappointed in a lot of your elected officials, some of your favorite ones too. If that's what you don't like, I don't care if it's left or right. Probably even 60 to 70% of political decisions are made on personal stuff, just like this. This is why we play politics. This is why lobbying is a thing. This is why relationship management is a thing.
Yeah. They're people too, at the end of the day.
Yes.
Sure.
So, and it's not just about Zelensky going to Pennsylvania. That's just a kind of flashpoint example, you know, a Steve Bannon style, you know, freeze it and polarize it kind of example. But lest we not forget, impeachment 1 was centered around Ukraine. The Hunter Biden laptop and everything that came out of that was all around Ukraine. Ukraine has reared its ugly head in the business of Donald Trump many, many times. And that is enough to even for him to think this is not actually personal. There's something else going on around here. And so that elevates and escalates his reasoning, and it's not just personal. I just happen to be an avatar. They have frozen and polarized me in this context. And so there's that kind of, you know, just to kind of retort that. And then the final point as to the world order, you know, the 20th century word was spheres of influence. I think that, you know, the fancy words the kids use now is like multipolar world or multipolar sort of order. I don't know right now if I like the idea of a multipolar order yet, but I do think that there should be a new American hegemony. And I think that a new vision of it needs to be proposed and implemented and executed. I think that the MAGA people, the America First agenda is actually the thing that will enable that to happen. I also think that I fundamentally, if we want to stay away from a multipolar world, and we want America to be number one. Yes, I do believe in some kind of hegemony, but I don't like the deal that we have now. And we are in a situation where we have all the expenses of an empire and none of the benefits. We have a situation where we fund most of Europe's defense, and they have the nerve to browbeat us about free healthcare and all sorts of other nice things that they have that our citizens don't have because we fund their defense.
Yeah.
Right.
Blasphemy laws.
Yeah. I mean, blasphemy laws too. I mean, look, it's you know, forget about, you know, and that's just going into those sort of intangible ideals around free speech and free enterprise, freedom of religion, all that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's important.
That's all important. But that's on top of then the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know what I mean? That's a little above even the basic stuff.
Well, the basic stuff, this is what I want to go to Joseph on. The basic stuff, I think, for any American, you know, asking, well, why should I support Ukraine? It does come down to how exactly can the United States, you know, let alone Europe, end up getting royally screwed in terms of both soft power and hard power by a future, you know, China-Russia alliance that's going to start taking different parts of the world. So I don't know, that to me seems to be the biggest concern here for Americans, you know, because you could say, well, why do I care about what's happening in Europe? That's Europe's business. So I don't know, Joseph, any thoughts on that? Because everything else. Oh, Vish,
I want to say one line to that, and then you could go on.
Sure.
I think that America has more soft power in KFC fried chicken and Wrangler jeans and Iron Man movies than it does with any program on USAID.
100%. 100%. There is no argument that you're going to get out of me about that, Vish. I was talking more about the soft power of China enacting on the United States in the future.
They won't be able to compete.
Well, that's
will
kind
not
of
be
what
able
we're
to compete with KFC. I promise.
All right, Joseph. What are your thoughts when it comes to why should Americans, you know, even bother? Like, just imagine the most skeptical Machiavellian kind of American that has absolutely no love for any Ukrainian lives, doesn't give a crap. why would they care for their own benefit down the line?
Well, first, y'all, I would say when it comes to KFC, I am a big fan of RFK Jr. and making America healthy again. I'm very glad that Ukraine is not polluted in the same way by American chemical agriculture. And by the way, this is something that under Biden was at risk for Ukraine, but now, shockingly, under Trump. And I wish RFK would realize this. But if you give up Ukraine to these other interests, including China, you're going to lose the largest country in Europe, which still has natural chemical-free food. It's a huge story because the BBC will never talk about this. But Ukraine does have that. I mean, I had horrible allergies my whole life. I don't take medicine anymore in Ukraine. I don't need to because the food's healthy. So one little point. So on the KFC point, I think actually we can find a lot of connection points here. And so my big story is not, like I can see why people don't want to support foreign wars. I also don't want to support foreign wars. I started my career. I was mentored by the evil machine, News Corporation, Roger Ailes, Bill Kristol, and all that. And I escaped. I gave everything up. I escaped in a car chase from New York. I quit my luxurious job at Fox because I hated it. Because I loved it, but I hated what they stood for. And I rejected it. I rejected the war machine. And I'm not here because I believe in the war machine. I'm here precisely to fight the war machine. It's a war machine that wants this war to continue. Or for Russia to win. But I tell you, both Americans and Ukrainians have been lied to by the Uniparty in Washington since 1991. Democrats and Republicans. In 1991, the Soviet Union was breaking up, and George H.W. Bush came to Kyiv in a speech written by Condoleezza Rice, by the way. The war machine is all connected, and told the Ukrainians, "Hey kids, stick with Moscow. Don't be free," because this is the mentality of this. He was former director of CIA. This is the mentality of the deep state. Don't be too free. Keep your freedom in check. And Ukrainians refuse to do that. And so what I would ask of Americans, especially MAGA Americans, okay, fine. If you don't want to support it, it's fine. But what really is amazing to me is, don't lie about Ukraine, because Ukraine is the most MAGA country in Europe. It's the Texas of Europe. If you meet Ukrainians, like if you got past the filter bubble of the media that only interviews Zelensky and all that. In fact, last week we had a podcaster who works for Elon Musk came here, and I got him to interview Ukrainian regular warriors, like heroes, and people who would resonate with MAGA. But he won't release the interviews because he only wanted to talk to Zelensky. But for Ukrainians, everyone talks trash about Zelensky every day. This is the most.
People have developed armor, though, for that stuff, I think, just Joseph, when it comes to the people who are talking about the military-industrial complex. Their armor, have you ever heard of Virgin armor? Their armor is so thick and strong that anything that you talk about relating to how good Ukraine is, it just flies right past them. I think the most important thing here, is go beyond that.
I mean, I understand it deeply, and I put myself through the thought exercise. If I had never been here, I was traveling the world before the pandemic started, and I ended up in Ukraine when the music stopped and everyone got stuck. And I stayed here during the pandemic because it was one of the freest countries in the world during the pandemic. It has one of the lowest COVID vaccination rates in Europe and in the world. And even among the official vaccination rate, most of those are fake. I know it because I was here. Even the doctors and the soldiers and the Ukraine, but Ukrainians from the Soviet times, they knew how to do it quietly, because if you have your freedom quietly, you're less likely to have someone take it. That's what they thought, but now Russia's trying to take it. And so what I'm trying to break through is this filter bubble that Reuters and the AFP and all that the media will never will never tell, is that Ukraine is actually the most MAGA country in Europe, and that doesn't mean you have to support it, but at least I think it would mean you don't stop unfairly attacking it. Like when Elon is tweeting that he cares about the guys in the front line, but he doesn't talk to them. They want to keep fighting because they know if they don't stop it now, it's not going to stop. And this is the weird hypocrisy I can't figure out. It's not hypocrisy. It's a inability yet to understand. Like JD Vance
maybe it's
lecturing,
possible. Maybe you can break through it. But that's not my point, though.
I'm gonna have to go in a minute because I gotta go. But I want to put it. Because Vish, your point about the impeachment, the first impeachment of Donald Trump and of Joe Biden and Burisma, These are, and then the third point I would add is Victoria Nuland in 2014 from the State Department. These are indeed the three core foundational reasons, plus the general and righteous disgust with Washington after 20 years of failed wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Those are the four reasons I think why most Americans don't want to help Ukraine or anything, and they're sick of it, and they don't trust Washington at all. And I'll just point out quickly, for one, maybe a few things that would change the perspective on this. With Burisma, everyone from Tucker Carlson to the BBC strangely agrees that Burisma is Ukrainian. That's bullshit. Burisma is Russian. 2014, the CEO of Burisma was a member of the cabinet of the pro-Kremlin government in Kyiv. The Ukrainian people had
was a Russian guy.
The name doesn't matter because no one's going to care. Yeah. But we got to talk like McDonald's to the people. But like this, the Burisma CEO was in the cabinet of the pro-Kremlin government. Ukrainian people had their own, you could say January 6th, you could say Ottawa truckers protest times a million, because they kicked out the pro-Kremlin regime. And notably, it was in March, so a few weeks after the revolution happened, the CEO of Burisma, and this is in congressional testimony from 2023, he met with Hunter Biden's business partner in Moscow and made a deal with Biden and his business partner to pay him $50,000 a month. And the CEO of Burisma had an incentive. He did not want Ukraine to be independent. He wanted the old way where the Kremlin controlled it. And notably, Burisma's main energy assets were in the Crimean Peninsula, which for 3 weeks, from February 24th until mid-March, were under the control of the Free Ukrainians. And they had to get them back. And to me, that's a total quid pro quo. But the main media will never investigate it at all. At all. And unfortunately, MAGA won't even look into it because they just assume that this is Burisma, Biden, Ukraine, but it's actually Burisma, Biden, Russia. And it's a total quid pro quo. Burisma paid the son of the sitting U.S. vice president, who was in charge of Ukraine policy, because Obama didn't give a shit, was in charge of Ukraine policy. And guess what? What was the U.S. policy, despite our previous security guarantees to Ukraine, typical Washington lies in 1996 and 1994, Biden's policy was to send Ukraine nothing. And he did nothing. And it was only Trump who sent javelins when Trump was president. And then everyone says, oh, well, Biden did so much after 2022. And that's a whole other story. But if you plot, Biden restricted Ukraine from winning. You can look at 6 key moments from 2022 to now, to the end of Biden's presidency. Where not Biden because he wasn't mentally there. But
Obama.
No, Biden, 2022 to now, when his team restricted Ukraine from winning. And we have to look at, oh, wait a second. He made millions of dollars from Moscow and from a pro-Kremlin company that the Ukrainian people kicked out of their country, a company that was opposed to Ukraine's independence. That's Burisma. It's bullshit. Victoria Nuland, State Department official. Elon tweets about this once a week. And it's so hard for me to get to Ukrainians to understand this. They can't believe that this is actually a stumbling block, but it is. And I understand why. Because if I too would believe it if I had never seen the facts on it, because I don't trust Washington at all. I hate them. Vish, I think we agree probably on everything else besides this topic here. But that's precisely why I'm here in Ukraine. And I was meeting with a Ukrainian member of parliament 2 weeks ago, who, as a student, she was a protester in 2014. And she was in the room with Victoria Nuland. And she said, oh, Nuland, she was so horrible. I said, and I already knew this, but I said, why? Why was she horrible? And she's like, because she was trying to make us negotiate and make a deal with the pro-Kremlin government, because that was the official policy of the American deep state. Keep your freedom in check, make a deal with the Yanukovych regime. And if you look closely at the details of the leaked phone call with Victoria Nuland, phone call from 2014, you'll see she wasn't creating the revolution. She was trying to control it in that egotistical American way. And she never has disavowed this, because what American bureaucrat wouldn't love to be seen as the creator of a revolution? I don't trust Victoria Nuland. Her brother-in-law and sister-in-law are, the Institute for the Study of War. They were keenly involved in the creation of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, but they are nothing to do with Ukraine's cause of freedom and independence. And the last point, I think, which was Vish raised, which
I rather love the Kagans. You're right about everything. Everything you just said now, except that, is correct.
I'm glad you love them, but I stick to the facts. I'm sorry. I don't. Okay. and I like apple juice. Just okay, great. So I'm so sorry. On the Trump impeachment, if you go back and I encourage people to go back and look at the transcript. It's a readout. It's not a transcript of the Trump-Zelensky phone call. Trump and Zelensky. It was so that call that what both of them said was so prescient for everything we have now, and most of that call was saying that Angela Merkel was in bed with Russia. They both were agreeing on that totally, and guess what? Totally proven and totally right, and they were saying that Europe was weak. And the Ukraine, and here's I think why that impeachment happened. Trump and Zelensky both had a lot in common. They both were outsiders, entertainers, and they wanted to and the people who elected them wanted to change the system. They didn't want to be governed in the same old way. And in fact, this might help make the case most clearly. That was in July. In 2 days before that phone call, the Washington Post had a front page story. Washington Post, not a Trump lover, front page story talking about Joe Biden's raising questions about Biden family corruption in Russia and Ukraine. So no wonder Trump brought it up. In fact, Trump had an obligation to bring that up in a phone call with Zelensky. No one talks about that. He was totally justified and had every right to do it because the Washington Post said so 2 days before. I have not seen a single person or a single article that's mentioned that, but you can look it up. And then the second point, in May, just a few months before that, May 2019, the New York Times, that's when they first posted the story about the money that Hunter Biden made from Burisma, May 2019. And there were three people that wrote that story. One of them was this woman, Julia Mendel. And President Zelensky hired her as his press secretary 1 month later. So when Zelensky was speaking to Trump, his press secretary was the person who broke the story in the New York Times about Hunter Biden's corruption money with Burisma. So Zelensky knew more than Trump about all of this, and no one pieces that together. And so what my theory is, and I think it's sort of proven out, is that the people listening to that call saw that if Trump and Zelensky worked together, they would expose the corruption that actually was holding back free people in America and in Ukraine and Europe. And they said we have to stop it because it's going to expose our game and everything that Elon's trying to do now with Doge. But the problem is that MAGA people are understandably so blinded and so conditioned, in a sense, to be sympathetic to Russia because of the Russia hoax, that they don't examine these facts. And I think if they did, it would change the calculus. So all I ask, fine if you don't want to support Ukraine, but please make sure you're telling the right story, and please make sure you've actually investigated what you're talking about.
I don't know what happened to Vish. Vish, are you still here? Because you were gone in the...
He texted, "Hey, Lev, I need to bounce."
Oh, okay. I see. No, was that Vish or was that... I think that was Armand.
Armand.
That
Vish?
was Armand. Yeah, I don't know what's happening with Vish. Let's see if we can get Vish back in here, because here is the main point. A lot of the things that we were talking about here regarding Ukraine, Russia, whether or not Ukraine is a prosperous, potentially country that America can make deals with, whether it's honorable, and whether a lot of these deep state operations that went on with Ukraine are things that are, how do I say it? Are things that are not Ukraine's problem. It has primarily to do with people like Victoria Nuland and Angela Merkel and all these, bad people. That is good. But the only problem here is that if you imagine Ukraine as a different planet that has some force field around it where, whatever happens in Ukraine stays in Ukraine, that's one thing. And I think this is the mentality that a lot of people who are supporting Donald Trump have, that it's not their problem. Yes, Joseph, I agree with you. A lot of these things are, very unfortunate, and I wish the Ukrainian people the best. But you know what? It's not our problem. You know what I mean, right? Like that's...
Yeah, but I don't think they don't wish him the best. And I think, look, why did Vish leave? Why? I don't know. He left right at the crescendo of everything I was saying, getting to the foundation.
No, I think there may have been a tech problem. I don't know.
I'm not going to give him that. Because it was right. Like, this is, like, I want them, people need to hear this. They believe, I totally understand. I agree with the frustrations with the American system. And in fact, but
Vish has a
what
lot
I'm
of Vish
saying
has
is
a lot of points. Vish is not wrong about a lot of stuff. And
Mhm.
we have to talk to guys like Vish.
he's
I'm
wrong
really
about
happy
the
to be,
foundation.
yeah.
No, absolutely. I
And
mean,
that's it.
here's the thing, though. The thing that we kept circling around, which was almost grasped, but it hasn't been fully grasped at all, is for the people who really don't care about Ukraine or what happens to it, for those who Ukraine might as well be a different planet, for those people, what exactly would be the justification to put any penny of America, now the penny's going away, but any amount of money of the United States government where, maybe Europe's going to support it, and even if Europe doesn't work out, who cares? That, I think, is completely missing from the conversation and shouldn't, because what that has to do with is whether or not Russia would ever align itself with America. Because if Russia does align itself with America and goes away from China, kind of a reverse, Nixon China move right there, if that is the case, then I could see the points that a lot of MAGA people bring up, where you're going to stop this horrible bloodshedding from occurring when you bring in Russia as a good neighbor, a good trade partner, and eventually the Ukrainians will get used to being ruled by the Russians, and it's fine. Russia's not going to go any further. That is the mindset which I think a lot of people have today. Never mind anything about Ukrainian honor or any of these things you've experienced. But that is something that I don't think we have talked about that much at all. Like, we sort of brushed upon it, but everything else, I'm sorry, I agree with you about a lot of these things, Joseph. Everything else, if we're being just completely realist here, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think about Ukraine. It doesn't matter if Ukraine is good, bad. What really does matter for a lot of Americans is what is going to happen down the road when you're going to have people who start influencing, from China, a lot of United States politicians to an even greater extent that they were doing right now. If, for example, the resources that Russia is going to get with Ukraine are going to be de facto Chinese resources, and then China's going to grow stronger, its influence on the world is going to grow stronger. To me, at least, that's the real key right here, and I don't think we've talked about that enough.
Lev, that's the key for you, and probably for Vlad and for many others. But it's not the key. We saw from Kisha, it's not the key. Like here I am under drone attack, and we're talking about some fucking thing in Pennsylvania campaign event. Like I tell you, and I know this deeply. Those things matter, and that's why I went for the heart of it. The very foundation of all and it's become almost a religious belief now against Ukraine, and I get it. It's a rejection of a righteous rejection of Iraq, Afghanistan, the pandemic bullshit, all of that. They just don't trust any, and I don't trust any the government on this either. But it's Nuland, it's Burisma, and if we focus on those points, but when that's it, and it really is that simple. Because we can talk about security guarantees and how this benefits America, but unless we address those points, I don't see. I'm happy to talk about. I mean, the money, it's not actually, Vlad. It's even less than the figure you cited, because most of the money to Ukraine is valuation of old weapons, and no one has done a study of this. By the way, Elon realized that finally. He did. He responded. He actually kind of corrected Trump, and he said, "Oh, Zelensky was talking about that most of the money went to Democrat projects in America." But no one has done a study of this. For example, the Pentagon is always buying new weapons. And now a lot of those new weapons get folded into the Ukraine packages. I haven't seen anyone do a good study separating out. Let's say there was no war now, Russian war in Ukraine. What percentage of the Ukraine spending would be spent anyway for the Pentagon? Because that really, that gets folded into the Ukraine spending packages. New stuff for the Pentagon, regardless of what's coming to Ukraine. And so this is the typical tricks and BS of Washington that Elon and Doge are trying to get rid of. And Ukraine, I think what the most, I would say, if you had to have one really impactful benefit of Ukraine is, everyone was panicking about the drones in New Jersey. They are a little bit freaked out about what can happen with China, but we are protected, as Trump said, by the beautiful oceans. But even Pete Hegg said Vish is back, said about our that the U.S. Navy is very vulnerable. Ukrainians have the answers for this. Ukrainians have learned these 3 years. They have incredible innovation. whether with the sea drones that have destroyed the Black Sea Fleet of Russia, and it's I mean, Ukrainian innovation can teach America a lot, and it reveals the Pentagon waste. And America has a chance right now to have as an ally the biggest army in Europe, the most battle experienced army in the free world, who deeply, deeply loves America, and also is extremely innovative country that is happy to share this with the US. So we can either use that, and actually, I don't think it's even at a cost to us. It's not. It's actually at a benefit because the American defense industry, the fat cats, as always, are profiting very nicely. So this is actually could be a total profit. And if America really allied with Ukraine, I mean, I think Ukraine is much more important than Greenland. Not only the mineral resources, but the human. In Greenland, you have 12 people. Here you have an entire country of fighters, warriors, and innovators who deeply love America and even still do now. Even now, there's plenty of Trump supporters here. They're a little wondering what he's talking about, but they still love America. I don't think you could have a better ally as we try to move the chess pieces around. And you know what? It is stupider for the United States to give up Ukraine than it is for Keir Starmer to give up Diego Garcia. There.
Okay.
Now, I want to make sure we get to Vish, and Vish is not in the spaces right
Vish
now.
Vish,
but I want to make sure.
I just want to back Joseph up, but I want to. Everything Joseph says is completely right, except like I personally like the Cajuns. I went on vacation with them. I like them. Everything you say except that is totally correct, Joseph. It's the one thing I disagree with you. And that's a completely minor thing. Like you're like you like apple juice. I prefer orange juice. This is something that we need to tell Vish, on which he and his people have a really interesting and useful point that nobody in our camp ever says, which I've written a lot about. Ukraine has gotten involved in very unpleasant ways, but not ways which are dissimilar from the way the Qataris and the Saudis and the Koreans and lots of other people have gotten involved in American internal politics with the end of a Cold War consensus. This is something that you and your guys are totally right about, Vish. There is no more legal, normative, polities, anything, social consensus on what foreign actors are allowed to do internally within American politics. If you think about the 1960s or 70s or 80s, the son of one of the most powerful U.S. senators, a vice president, a presidential candidate, doing business with the Red Chinese or the Soviet Union would have been something that we would have had him shot for, or that would have been, like think about the Kennedy administration. Think about JFK's son or his brother's son doing business with the Red Chinese or the Red or the Vietnamese or the Soviets. This was rightly illegal, and it was such a bipartisan social consensus on this that guy would have literally gotten shot, and rightly so, for treason against the United States. With the end of a Cold War consensus, there is no normative set of norms, of politesse, of rules, of understandings amongst American elites of what you can and cannot do with other countries, right? We screwed up the post-Cold War consensus. We screwed up the globalization of the 90s and the aughts. This is 30 years of stupid American policy. You and I agree on that, obviously. But what happened with Ukraine is that Ukraine is a gray zone full of dark and black and gray and white cash.
I don't know what that is, but go on, Vlad.
It's the fact that Ukraine is this zone which flips back between pro-Western and pro-Soviet, pro-Russian, pro-Moscow control, and elections there are very competitive. So for 15 years, Americans from both parties came in to make money. I once did a bar graph. 4 out of the 6 presidential candidates had the chief of staff or one of our major political operatives making money. The Obamas were waist deep in Ukraine. The Clintons, they were flying around on Pinchuk's private plane. I don't know if here Pinchuk will ever invite me back to his conferences after I say this, right? What's his name? McCain's guys were making hand over fist in Ukraine. Ukraine was an ATM, bipartisan, for anybody who wanted quick cash. And they were Trent Lott was making lobbying money. All these guys, Vish, you have to understand, all these guys in DC, Republican, Democrat, Clinton people, John McCain people, Romney people, certainly Obama people were making shitloads of cash, making money in Ukraine. So the Ukrainian political elites became very adept at paying off people in Washington, D.C. And so they kept playing this game, and Poroshenko did very stupid shit in 2016. I've written about this. You could read my pieces. I was involved in both Ukraine in 2016 and in Ukraine Gate. You can Google me, CNN. This is all in the public domain. The Poroshenko administration made very stupid decisions backing the Clinton campaign in 2016. Absolutely, this is not Zelensky's fault. I tell you this as both like an independent American who doesn't give a shit about the Democratic Party, in fact doesn't like them, and I'm happy that Trump won. I tell you this as a Ukrainian American, right? The Poroshenko people did stupid shit. Ukraine got caught in the first Trump impeachment. Ukraine got caught up in Russiagate, which was a conspiracy theory of some of my more stupid colleagues in the legacy press, intelligence agents inside the America and the bureaucracy. Russiagate was a massive conspiracy theory, and Donald Trump doesn't need all the facts to understand that.
Vlad, I got to interject because how did Ukraine get caught up in that? So here's what I believe in being precise as a reporter, as a journalist. Again, and I think because Vish dropped off, and we were talking like the Trump. Are you talking about the Trump impeachment, the Trump #1 impeachment? Trump and Zelensky. Go back. I want everyone to go back and read the readout of that call. They were really prepared to work together, and I think that this could happen again. But someone did not want them to work together.
I'm saying is that, sorry, I'm totally interrupt. I'm saying that the Ukrainians didn't want that. The Democratic Party used Ukraine as grist for political partisan warfare, which was not to Ukraine's advantage, obviously, clearly.
Yeah, what they really were doing is they were preventing Trump and Zelensky from working together, from investigating what the Bidens had done and the corrupt money that the Bidens made from Russia that was trying to stop Ukraine's revolution, that was trying to stop Ukraine's independence. And in fact, I know this so well because in October of that year, so right when the impeachment hearings were beginning, I was in Washington. I'd been traveling the world. Vlad, I stopped in Ukraine to give some lecture at a university, and then I went to Washington. And some friends invited me for a coffee at the White House, and it was right when the first impeachment of Trump was beginning. Yeah. And Vish, probably some of these guys who I was meeting with, and I was like, should I tell people I've just been in Ukraine, because I was like the scary ward in Washington at that time, and everyone was on edge because of Ukraine, because of the impeachment, and I was talking to my friends in front of the White House on the lawn, and a senior employee of Trump came up, and when she found out I'd been in Ukraine, she started screaming at me to get away, get away, get away. And what that showed me was like the Democrats, through their campaign to use Ukraine as a weapon to disguise, to cover up Trump and Zelensky's attempts to investigate the corruption. They're the ones that poisoned. I mean, I think that Trump should have been able to get beyond that back then, but now there's a better team, I think, than there was in 2016. But what the Vindman brothers, one of them is now in Congress, did was traitorous. It was, I mean, you should be fired for it in any context for that. But doing that, working in the White House, absolutely treasonous and traitorous. By the way, I
tried to confront Vindman, the one who was in congressman. I tried to confront him at 23.
Bad guy.
One of them I was on a panel with, and I like the other one, even though they're both involved in this. I tried to confront the congressman in 23 at the Pinchuk forum, and he was just very dismissive, and he's a jerk. I didn't vote for that guy, but like these guys did. And I grew up in the same apartment building as the Vindmans in Brighton Beach, just so you know. Look, Vish is smiling. This guy is smiling. I grew up in the same apartment building as the Vindmans, and I got caught on the other side of Ukraine Gate as these guys, right? I confronted him at the thing, and he was just really dismissive at me, talking to me like I was a MAGA, like tadpole or whatever, right? Vish, you have to understand, it's not Ukraine's fault that Democratic Party operatives and party animals hate us. You understand that?
Oh, you're muted right now, Vish, on StreamYard.
Yeah.
There we
So look, I get it, right? Like I get Ukraine is caught up in a machine that is and ended up being used by the Democrats as a cudgel, essentially, right? To kind of to JP's point, if there was a genuine attempt by Trump to work with Zelensky, which, by the way, I do think there was, but once you get your Vindmans involved who are Ukrainian, right, and it all poisons the well, right? And now you have to deal with the political situation as is. And the problem is that everyone wants their part of the deal without having to kiss the ring, right? And that's the problem, right? There has to be some penance. Someone has to say they messed up in front of Trump. You get what I mean? And because if not, he's just going to roll with his feelings, his views, and what his political base and the political will that's available to him, right? And so
I agree with you guys. I agree completely with that, and I think we're going to see something here that might break this mold a bit. And here's a little prediction, maybe.
Okay.
Like we look at the totally vapid leadership in Europe, weak and vapid. We felt that here in Ukraine. They hid behind America, but guess what? They're also hiding behind Ukraine, because if Ukraine falls, the Russia's there. It's coming, yeah. And the Europeans know it. They have a memory of this, and that's why they're buying American weapons. But they're hiding behind Ukraine, including the Poles. They're hiding behind Ukraine, who is actually bleeding. And I think maybe if this is going to work out well for everyone, that Zelensky will maneuver himself to leapfrog European leaders, because already the Ukrainian people, I look at Ukraine as like a nation of Winston Churchills, because in 1939, Europe fell. All these brave countries, Poland, Hungary, everyone, they fell.
Yeah.
They lost. France. It was all up to the United Kingdom to hold the line until the U.S. showed up. And Ukraine has flipped that script, because if Ukrainians weren't brave and really like the America of Europe, then Russia already would control the largest country in Europe. They'd have the resources, and as they did with Chechens and others, they would have Ukrainian ingenuity at their disposal. Ukrainians say, no, we refuse to accept your tyranny. We will never partake in that, and we'll die
100%.
on that point. And so I think there's a chance here for Zelensky. There's bad people in Zelensky's team, and everyone knows that, and he's got to get rid of that. And most people here want a new president. They do. But they just know that you can't do it right now in the war. That's exactly what Russia wants. That'd be a perfect day for attacks. It'd be the worst thing imaginable. So they're following the Constitution. It's still martial law, because unfortunately it's still war. But Zelensky does have a lot of good traits. And I think he's a much better leader than Macron and Scholz and Sirkir, because Zelensky is at least strong. In World War II, prime ministers and kings and queens went to exile. They went to Canada. They fled. Zelensky stayed here, and he was weak before 2020.
He survived 12 assassination attempts. I mean, like I had dinner.
Many people
I
have.
had dinner
So
with
you,
him
I'm
before
sure.
the war. So I have
sure
also,
you
but I
have.
had dinner with him before the war. I didn't think much of him, and I met him before he became president. I was at dinner with him. I thought he was a lightweight, and then when he stood up as he did, I said, I at that point I was willing to give my life. In 2022, 23, I would have given my life for Zelensky. He stood up, and he really represents American values that Americans would get, not these weenie Europeans, man. I believe America's job is the imperial Rome to defend Greece, which is in the grand scheme of things. I believe in American empire. I'm at the Atlantic Council.
And so does Vish. I mean, Vish, you were talking before about American hegemony being possibly a good thing if it wasn't about all of this U.S. aid bullshit. But that being said, if we are getting to the heart of the issue here, that is, if Ukraine falls, God forbid, if Russia takes Ukraine, takes the territory, takes the resources, then the concern here, and it's like if you were a betting man, the concern would be, okay, how much would you want to bet that Poland and the Baltic countries and the rest of Europe around that are going to have like a good defensive perimeter? Article 5 is going to be invoked, or are we kind of in agreement that a lot of these European leaders are fucking cowards and they're not going to do anything once Russia starts going into the time when Article 5 should be activated? Like, to me, and I think to a lot of people, that is where Americans should care about this, because again, Vish, if you're a betting man, if Russia has this territory and wants to keep going further, there's not going to be anything to stop it. So like, how much would you bet that it would keep going there rather than being like this nice trade partner? Like, if that would be the mindset, I think you can understand. I think a lot of MAGA people can understand why people don't want Russia and China to grow stronger here. Because even if we have an ocean separating us, I don't think that matters when it comes to soft power and the fact that we have airplanes today. Because if we're looking at, for example, the red carpet that was rolled for Xi Jinping by, the California Governor Newsom. Gavin Newsom rolled out the red carpet. He got rid of all the homeless people just because, his emperor was paying a visit there. So he had to, act accordingly. I don't want that to be the reality for 99% of U.S. politicians in the future when, if you imagine, like, because again, China owns Russia. Russia's just China's dog as far as I'm concerned right now. So if China, not Russia, if China has all these resources and all of this land in the future, this technocratic hellscape, that's what Bannon's against, right? Like, Bannon hates that kind of technocratic hellscape. So to me, like, I don't want that to be what is running the United States. I want the United States to be a free country. And yeah, you could say, well, right now, China's also been influencing the Democrats 100%. But I hope that I'm able to paint a picture here of how it could get so much worse. And that, to me, is like what I want to prevent. I don't know, Vish, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that we need to figure out a way to get, part of Bannon's strategy, and that is to wrestle away Russia from China then, right? It just is what it is, and that's why there has to be an effort made. But that doesn't mean, do I want to just, if Putin says you have to give me all of Ukraine in order for me to stop this war, like, that doesn't sound like a great deal to me. But if he says, however far the lines have advanced now, we keep that, right? And if he says that, to get it done now, that might need to happen. And I know people hate people who are supporters hate hearing that. And in the long term, do I believe am I a betting man? Do I believe that they'll try to advance the lines? Yes, I do believe that, right? But this is where, I asked the question, hey, Germany, why haven't you started training your soldiers with a little more than broomsticks, right? Why have you, I know Poland is very worried about that too. They all have long histories there. They all know each other well. They all know each other the best. They know exactly what each other's proclivities are, right? If that's the case, well, what has stopped you from accounting for that or adapting to that and making sure that Russia is not going to advance? You have a lot of civilizational, institutional knowledge that Americans don't have. All we can do is provide money and weapons. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, after that, it's kind of up to you guys who know the enemy best for a long, long time on a civilizational basis to actually do the job, right? Fight back, beat back on them. And if they're not prepared today, like, what was the 100-year post-world order for, right? If it's like, oh, we're gonna send you all this money in NATO and all this stuff, so you guys can rebuild, right? And now I ask today, after 100 years, is like, so what have you built, right?
A welfare state with blasphemy laws.
Hey, but
Lev and Vish,
let me. I want to interject here because a lot of this is Biden's problem. Biden created this problem. So, for example, like Ukrainians, they wanted F-16s back in 2022, and Denmark, the little tiny kingdom of Denmark, and the Netherlands wanted to give F-16s. but it was Washington that said no. So it wasn't F-16s from America, but because Washington has proprietary technology, and now we give F-16s to Pakistan and to Morocco, but they wouldn't let Denmark and the Netherlands until 2024. So this is very important. This is a failure of Biden and Jake Sullivan. Biden, who was in charge, but who was in charge, we don't know, but maybe we do. But Biden administration, I think so. Biden administration, this is a very important point. Europe, the little European countries, wanted to give everything to Ukraine. And Biden continually said, no, no, no. So that's part of the reason why we are where we are. So it's not totally fair to look at this and say, oh, Ukraine was given everything. No, Ukraine was restricted. And Europe, the good countries in Europe who wanted to fight and punch above their weight, were restricted by Joe Biden. And that's what I can't understand is that why can't the Team Trump see that? Everyone here, the day Trump was elected, people were very happy in Kyiv. They thought, at last, we're done with this. And if you look at, we have these little experiments from the Biden time. Every time Ukraine was given weapons and permission to use them, there were a few times when Biden said, okay, fine. And Ukraine got stronger and was able to push back. There's no Russian Navy in the Black Sea anymore. It's gone. It's like, so if Russia takes back Crimea, does that mean Russia gets to move its Navy back? Ukraine spent 2 years with homemade sea drones destroying Russia's Navy. It's a phenomenal accomplishment that actually, when Pete Hegseth was worried about the American Navy, you can learn from the Ukrainians. Like, this is the thing. Like, you have the best ally here. They've made all of this progress, but because Biden kept restricting them and because the media did a shitty job of telling the story, we're about to lose it all and erase it all. And that's what I don't understand.
Well, my retort to that would be, well, it sounds like Donald Trump is trying to get America out of the way so that the other European countries can actually, all right, if you got F-16s, go send them, right? Mm-hmm. Why is it that we have to pay for that, right?
Well, they're not paying. No.
They're not F-16s out America, man. You can't. No one can give or transfer American F-16s. Not the Saudis, not the Iranians, not the Israelis, not the Moroccans, not the Pakistanis, not the Poles, not the Denmark. No one can transfer them without the Pentagon's permission, and the president gives that permission. You understand?
Okay, fine. Maybe then. Well, that's a concrete ask, right?
Yeah, there we go.
What I mean is, like, I wish we were in this type of conversation with Washington because, like,
we kind of are.
Like, no, but we are here. But like, so Team Trump is responding to the reality as painted by Biden, which was a false reality. Like right. Biden didn't actually give that much support to Ukraine. He restricted Ukraine continually, and but for some reason, Team Trump is responding to the lies of Biden rather than the reality on the ground. And that's my problem here. That's what I don't understand. I'm confused.
Well, I mean, I think once the cost has escalated to this point, it's again, there's so many things have already muddied the water, right? And this is your ultimate political problem, is that you live linearly downstream from all of those mess ups, right? And there's no turning them back. And so
there's Doge. We see turning back right now. We are literally turning back. We are literally going to zero. It's beautiful. I love it. It's great.
I get that. But it's not that is also again a function of being downstream from whatever happened before. You can't turn back the clock on these things. You can't make feelings go away. You can't make perceptions go away unless you provide a new perception, right? And perhaps this is a problem that is emblematic or represented by the people who have already been doing that messaging for
Vish, if Jay and I take you to Ukraine next week and a half, will you come? We know the people who will pay for your trip. You want to come? We'll take you around. It would be our honor to spend 5 days in Kyiv with you. You'll meet MPs and anyone you want to meet. Other than Zelensky, I can't promise that he's a busy guy, or Yermak. They're busy guys. But if you want
to bring Gavin along too.
I'll bring anybody. Vish, I'm serious. Jay and I, Joseph, you'll take him around with me.
Sure, let's do it.
I'm not afraid to go anywhere. It just depends on if my schedule will allow.
I know you're not.
Hey, man, you're welcome. You're welcome. And I think this might be a good.
I know who'll pay for, man.
This might be a good note for me to slide out. But But Lev, you're welcome as well. That would be great. This is a great
Absolutely.
idea.
Yeah,
And,
we can definitely work something out. I mean, this is extremely important. The fact that we get to talk about this right now, in good faith, that there's been so much mudslinging going around and so many emotions.
Yeah.
And again, like, we don't want the worst to happen. I just don't want the United States to be giving additional, to use like the RPG references, like before the final boss is destroyed, you as the main characters just like give it a bunch of potions and revive it and then make it a lot stronger to keep going. Like, Vish, I understand what you're talking about as far as all these things that do need to be worked out. And a lot of this is a human thing, high school kind of lasts forever. But at the same time, though, it is important to not give Russia the time and the energy to recuperate with China's help. And again, like, I think the real heart of this whole thing is there any possible way we can prove that Russia can go away from China? I do not think at all Russia's going to be able to go away from China, because for the same high school bullshit reason, because a lot of this mentality that leaders like Vladimir Putin employ go back to when they were kids, when they were in the KGB, what they were taught. Like, there are certain things that just become so hardened in people that you may think as, a reasonable person, surely he can be reasonable too. But like, I think you yourself understand, Vish, like, certain things, it's not about being reasonable, and it's not about being logical. Things go way beyond that. And so if there was any way I could convey the fact that Russia under Putin is going to be stuck to China to Steve Bannon, I really want to convey that, because that, I think, that matters the most out of anything else, that realization. Because once that realization is there, the whole game changes.
Well, I think that's a fundamental thing that people should be illustrating, right? And the dream. Right, and the dream that Russia and China could ever be separated, right? If you're saying that it is impossible, well, you need to illustrate the impossibility, right? Why is that the case, right? And this is a fool's errand, right? And that, like, if you can do that in a convincing way, you might actually have something where the MAGA intelligentsia are gonna, consider as part of their geopolitical strategy, moving forward as we continue to grow in the regime and also kind of grow out it as like the more mainstream sort of conservative politics, moving forward for the next, at least decade or two.
I don't think it's going to take that long, though. And real quick, Vlad, I don't think it's going to take that long, because when it comes to what Russia is going to agree to, I think that at the same time, Trump, the art of the deal and all that, I think he's also feeling the pressure from people who are, much more reasonable than a lot of these shitlibs, who do have the ear of certain people within the MAGA movement, who are talking about how horrible of a thing it would be to give Russia all of this power right now. And China, imagine the United States downsizing its military while China ramps up its military at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, it's a real horror show there. So I think that we're going to see in the next couple of weeks how Russia is going to be rejecting anything at all that's not going to give it full carte blanche. And to point a real quick example out, in the 2022 meeting in Istanbul for this so-called peace deal, this guy Aristovich, who was working for Zelensky at the time, he had a completely separate take that he gave to the American media afterwards than he gave to Russian-speaking Ukrainian media. Where in the Russian-speaking Ukrainian media, he was talking about this deal being a complete joke, complete nonsense. He almost fell over the floor laughing. And then for some reason to the American media, he was saying it was such a great deal. But the reason why he was falling over the floor laughing was because that deal completely castrated the Ukrainian army to absolutely zilch. Thus, it's kind of saying, okay, there is nothing to stop Russia from just breaking this promise. Pinky swear, I'm not going to go beyond this point, President Trump. And then, maybe once Trump's not in office, or maybe while he's in office, if Putin feels bold enough, he'll be like, psych, I'm going in. What are you going to do about it? I already see that you're weak.
Aristovich is unreliable narrator, like Yasser Arafat, who said one thing in English and one thing in Arabic.
Yes.
Aristovich is an unreliable narrator and a character in his own right. Anyways, so that aside, it's true that they were trying to get the Ukrainian army down to 45 to 50,000 guys and to denazify it. It was all nonsense. Vish, all this stuff, I understand that this could sound like special pleading from people who care about that part of the world. A guy named Vlad and a guy named Lev telling you that,
And an Irishman, American.
Yeah,
an
there we
Irish
go.
guy,
Irish American.
and an Irish American who used to work at Fox telling you how important this is. Forget all that. We have good
quit
arguments.
Fox, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. You were at Fox. I mean, that gives you credibility with this guy and some of his friends. But first of all, we're not Democrats. I don't think we sound like Democrats, right? I'm very happy that these people in the Biden-Obama administration lost. I am, okay? Even though I haven't voted since 2016. I'm happy that shit's over. And I love the Middle East. I love the anti-DI stuff. I love the Middle East policy. If only we could convince them on this one issue that I care about, I'd be a happy camper. But all that aside, talking to a guy like you, it's values that you and people like you who go over to Hungary and are trying to figure out what the Hungarians can teach us Americans about statecraft. That's a dinky little Habsburgian country that has nothing to do with us. It's the Ukrainians who you should be going to hang out with. The average American MAGA guy or red team guy, if Bannon, we can get him in there for a week, he'd meet these guys. He would love them. They personify the kind of America that he would love to live in. It's not shit libs or progressives from Brooklyn that I grew up with who like really scream at you about trans stuff. None of that shit matters in Ukraine. None of it. This is the country that if we can save Western Europe, and in that sense, Western civilization, from being run by weenies, literal weenies, that on the continent is not going to come from France or the Hungarians. It's going to come from Kiev. You understand?
I get that, but if that was the case, then perhaps Ukraine should have made the move on the rest of Europe and did a little of their own regime change and get rid of the weenies that don't have your back, right? Because at the end of the day, do you really want America coming in and doing all that for you? And what do you think we're going to
done it twice before, man?
Huh?
America's done it World War I and World War II. It's American. Saving Europe from itself is America's birthday.
But remember, this time Ukrainians are doing the fighting. Don't forget that. Ukrainians they never asked. They don't want anyone else fighting here. They don't. And it's, by the way, it's the weapons that Republicans and Democrats took away from Ukraine. It wasn't only the nukes. It was Republicans and Democrats, including Obama and Lugar up until 2006. They took Ukraine's weapons away, not just the nukes. And every time Ukraine had a revolution and got more freedom, the Washington evil gremlin machine moved in to take away their ability to defend themselves. Because Washington has hated free people being armed. That's it. And that's why they have not supported Ukraine. That's it. And if you could come here, you'd see that.
I get that, but here's the other thing. Let's say what you want about Hungary. Hungary had our back, at least our movement's back, Donald Trump's back explicitly when it was disfavorable to them through the Biden regime, right? And so you could say, Ukraine. Well, hold on. You could say Ukraine was in no position to do that.
Sure.
Right? You could say that, but there are again linear effects downstream from that. That now, when that segment has taken the reins of the machine, we're going to remember who was there through our toughest times, right? And that is a narrative problem, a framing problem that you're dealing with, right? And because again, this is not just your normal political movement based on values and ideology and all that. Yeah, that's all there. But it's also highly emotionally charged because there is a very specific set of history of grievances, right, and history of wrongdoings that we felt and that we remember, right? All of that is layered on and compacted into the foundation of why we move the way we move today, right? And so, and if you're not able to unwind that, right? And I'm saying basically you're not able to unwind it as at the moment, but perhaps you could build a new foundation. But that's going to take an effort of good faith, right? From someone in Ukraine, right?
Wait, I'm gonna have to jump. But Vish, I think you missed some of my unwinding, and I think I accused you of bad faith when you disappeared. But now I know you were trying to get back, so I apologize for accusing you of bad faith because I was precisely unwinding the Vindman narrative, the Nuland narrative, and Burisma. But we'll have to look at that in the complete picture. Yeah,
I get that. But there's the there's the learned, such as yourself, and then there's the normie that powers the political will of the people who are.
Vish is talking about presenting like a play, having certain characters in the play, having them wear the right outfits, having them say lines in a certain kind of way so as to convey the right things. Like Shakespeare says, all the world's a stage and we are but actors. And, you know, you could say Zelensky is also an actor, but right now it seems like all of this bad faith has been coupled with him. So if there are certain people within Ukraine who could possibly be a representative of the MAGA-ness that you guys have defined exists in Ukraine, maybe something like that can cause somewhat of a change. And lastly, I just want to say, Vish, I think it's also important for the same people to try and make a lot of people in MAGA see how the Angela Merkels of the world, you know, these globalists, how they were pro-Russia, how it's not this dialectic that's been planted in a lot of people's minds.
By the way, that hasn't gotten past us. We understand that, right? The first thing we'll say is, why is Germany so scared of Russia? Why are they buying all their energy from Russia? It's the first thing we say. It's the first thing we say.
Good.
We're not under that illusion. But the problem is that it's so poisoned the whole well. We're saying, you know what? Screw all of you people. Do what you want to each other.
Right.
I get it, man. I understand.
No matter how much money we're spending there, everybody comes out hating us, right?
Vish,
I understand.
Vish, I just want to say to what you said before, you have to understand that the Hungarians are inside NATO, inside the European Union. They are safe and they're secure, and they are under the American defense umbrella, and they can do what they want to or not want to. The Ukrainians have a third president, American president in a row, whose bad moods and other emotional issues, and I'm talking about not just Biden, but Obama also. Obama screwed the Ukrainians over in 2014. I've had 3 Ukrainian generals, top generals, off the record fume at me that the Obama White House told them not to fight back in 2014 and 15. They are completely and totally and categorically and axiomatically dependent on the mood of whoever is in the White House, whatever his other commitments are, whatever his ideological, like Obama or Trump or Biden get the flu, they're in a bad mood. Ukraine's situation existentially degrades. Poroshenko knew this. Zelensky knew this. Any Ukrainian head of state knows that he has to dance between the Democrats and the Republicans, and it's a very, 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 very nasty situation to be in, because the state's very fragile, unlike the Hungarian state. So I understand that that Orban has always been on side with you guys, and he's gone to CPAC, and for 10 years he supported you when the Ukrainians had to pay off Trent Lott when Republicans were in power, and had to pay off Obama lobbyists when Obama was in power, and the same thing with Biden, now Trump again. They're in a terrible situation for the 4th presidential administration in a row, and they're just so fragile that they'll say or do whatever they need to do in that situation, and 3 years later it comes back to bite them in the ass.
Vlad,
you understand?
Vlad, perfect point, but one major caveat, because Ukrainians are not completely dependent on that. Because and here's the thing that gets missed in every single news story I read from the legacy media, that it's all about Zelensky. What was Zelensky agreed? No. Right now, you have the most well-armed country in Europe. You have people that have sacrificed, and they know what happens when you come under occupation.
Right.
They know it, and they don't want it.
No, they don't want it.
And they're going to fight. So no one is factoring that into it, by the way. You could have whatever beautiful deal you want. Ukrainians aren't giving up. I don't see any indication of it. And one of my favorite city here is Kharkiv. 30 miles from Russia. I think in America, we think, oh, maybe Western Ukraine can be safe and Eastern Ukraine can be Russia. The most patriotic, defiant place in Ukraine that I know is Kharkiv City, a Russian-speaking city, 30 miles from Russia. They're not giving up. So you can have whatever wonderful deals you want in the desert in Saudi Arabia, and no one mentions that. I would like to even see one line about that in a BBC story, but they'll never say that. And so very important to point out that fact, that it's really the people. And, in the first few weeks of this full-scale invasion, the government was not prepared. It was a total shit show. It was
100%.
only the people. Because this is the Cajun Navy, the Texas of Europe. That's Ukraine. That's what I try to convey. Guys, I got to jump. I'm very grateful. Vish, I'm grateful for that. You gave me a lot of insights and ideas. I mean, I'm glad. I agree with you on probably almost every other policy point and all that. But this is an important conversation to have. And Vlad, you as well. Thank you, man. Good to see you again. Lev, thank you for bringing us together.
Absolutely.
I have to jump. I'm so sorry.
And where can people find you? Joseph, where can people find you?
Don't find me in person. No, I'm saying I'm in Kyiv. Wait, if you're a Russian agent, no, don't. You can go to my website is down. I think it got hacked today. But you can find me at JP Lindsley, JP Lindsley on X and Instagram and YouTube. Normally at UkrainianFreedomNews.com, but that's gone. There we go. At JP Lindsley. Thank you guys, and God bless America. God bless Ukraine. See you guys.
Thank you so much, JP. And by the way, guys, just so you know, for all the people who are listening to this right now in Spaces, if you guys go into the Jumbotron, which is the link at the top of Spaces, that's going to take you to YouTube. If you guys are really enjoying this conversation, go to YouTube, subscribe to the show right now, click the bell, smash that like button. A lot of this helps because Break the Rules is the one place where we are going to be able to have these amazing crossovers of people who come from these different realms and usually don't really get a chance to interact with each other in public like this. Like, I think this is incredible, and it's a very, very important thing to do, especially right now. The time is running out, and I really, really hope that whatever deal America ends up making with Ukraine, it's not going to be one where it's going to allow Russia to just say psych and keep going on. And I hope that there's going to be enough time for, either what we're talking about right now, where, Vish, you're absolutely right, there should be some kind of representation of this other side of the story when it comes to Ukraine, and a complete understanding that, yes, the United States has been royally screwed by a lot of these machinations from the people, like we've described, whether it's Nuland, whether it's Vindman, et cetera, et cetera. That should definitely be at the top. I'm not seeing a lot of it at the top because I think that right now we are still in this weird dialectic, going all the way back to, Obama, I'd say. But I think now that we understand what needs to be done, this is something to work on. And meanwhile, I really hope that there is going to be enough pressure so as to not have this deal that's just going to leave Ukraine completely vulnerable. So whatever ugly piece is being talked about here, it's not going to result in Russia going further in. Because again, like Steve Bannon always talks about the danger of China. I don't want China to take over the world, man. And they seem to be poised to be able to do that because a lot of weak people around, not so much the Ukrainians, obviously, but a lot of weak leaders. And there should be a time, maybe we're heading into that right now, Vish, where, that whole saying, the wheel of history, weak men make bad times make strong men make good times. So I think right now we are going into the strongman thing, but we also have the internet. We have the ability to speak to each other, which we did not do before. So I really want something great to happen from this, and I definitely think it will with all of your help. Guys, thank you so much for watching this. Vlad, where could we find you and read your new article?
I put out a piece yesterday with my second one with the main Russia expert in the English-speaking world, who is Mark Galeotti. Vish, please take a look at it. It's kind of a anodyne piece. I caught a lot of flack from my friends for not being anti-Trump enough, although I do see, I see the logic in the way that Trump is playing this. I do. I don't want the Ukrainians to get screwed over. I wish they'd put more pressure on the Russians, but I get the brutalist. I grew up playing basketball and football on the Fred Trump Memorial Football Field in Abraham Lincoln High School. So like I like my sporting ethics I learned on the Fred Trump Memorial Football Field. I understand very well how Trump
played
plays
on that field for Tech. Bro, I went to Brooklyn Tech, so I played on that field.
Okay, so you know, both and your guys. I'd love to get you to Ukraine. I'd love for you to meet some important guys there. I'd love for you to actually get a sense of it. And I feel like, we're not Democratic Party animals or weenies. We're not your enemies, and we're not the enemies of MAGA. I have a lot of empathy for MAGA, and I want those guys to do well, and I want those guys to understand that this is a lot of us has become coded as anti-MAGA or anti-Trump because it became like putting a Ukraine flag was putting like a rainbow flag on one's Twitter profile. Like I don't
imagine how the black people feel with the trans flag having like the brown and the black right next to it.
It's like,
well, yeah, I mean, look, somebody also did. I understand somebody did that to you guys, right? And I've never looked at this as like, oh, it's a Democrat Republican thing. More than anything, it's more that there are so many bad actors on a global scale that have taken advantage of the situation in Ukraine for a long time, made a ton of money off of it. And
I told you that outright. I told you that outright.
Well, I understand that, right? I understand that. So, but now the what that ends up breeding on our side in our mind is, well, you know what? Just cut it off, right? That's what we're this is.
So what do we do, man? Vish, what do we do? You tell me now. What do we do in order to talk to your people?
Well, I think I illustrated. I think again, core problems, right? Core problem is that you have to show that you're on our side, right? And I think that's and it's not. And speaking the language of democracy and all this stuff doesn't work, right? That's the because then it's like, oh, who's been lecturing me about democracy for the last 2 years, right?
Barack Obama, USA.
Yeah, and that right. So it's all that and defending USA and all this stuff, and it's just that you've coded yourself into that corner when you do that.
I have an idea. Here's what we can do, Vlad. We can bring in people who are from the Russian political system formerly, who know how exactly things work there, and who have a great track record as far as being involved in that, who can possibly speak to the reality of where exactly Putin aligns himself when it comes to China. Because they're not going to be coming at it from, oh, we need to protect democracy in Ukraine. No,
I mean, just Vish, you wanna? I could set up a meeting with Khodorkovsky's people. I'm having dinner with Khodorkovsky's son on a couple of days. You want to meet these guys? I'm happy to.
Well, I live in San Diego now, so maybe another time when I'm back in New York, I'll get your contact, or DC. I'll get your contact info. We'll certainly stay in touch. Sure. So, short term, I think that, finding a way to show that you're on our side immediately is probably a good thing to try and mend this relationship so that perhaps Ukraine doesn't get screwed in a deal where Trump is the one doing most of the talking. So that's, I think, a short-term solution. But the long-term, to Lev's point and expanding on that, is how you have to illustrate that trying to separate Russia from China is a fool's errand, right? And that is a argument that you have to make on a long-term scale on multiple different fronts and levels.
Okay, so write that down. So that's the main argument that would work, is what you're saying.
That is the argument, yeah. Because for us, we're just trying to beat up on China. If you're telling me it's a waste of time to try and separate Russia from China, and you have to treat them as one, first of all, you're kind of already giving away the game, and because the whole fear is that Russia plus China, it's unstoppable. Right. So first you have to grant the premise, then say you're already dealing with an unstoppable force because they're already together. And then you have to say, and you can't separate them under any circumstance. Now what do you do? Right. And so that's the question you have to pose. And then that's, then there's a very interesting conversation to be had especially with MAGA at that point, right? And so and then you might actually get somewhere. Maybe you pull back some of this. I don't want to call it isolationist, but just the you pull back on this non-interventionist style of thinking, or like too extreme non-interventionism or isolationism, or just ending the whole empire concept and going to the multipolar world. A lot of those things can end if you can make this conversation
Interesting.
That's go that way.
That is a useful thing to hear. Thank you. I talk to people on the right all the time, and I found that all the arguments that we were using didn't resonate. We'd go to places like Idaho and Ohio, me and my friends, if someone would send us there. We talk to people and say, don't you understand that even the money from a military industrial complex, the majority of it's going to bases in your state as opposed to New York, where I'm from, growing up in the same apartment building as the Vindmans. I would tell them that, but none of that worked. None of those arguments worked. None of that made a dent in anybody's thinking. None of it. The only thing that they cared about was Russia and China, Christians being repressed in Ukraine, Christians getting killed, children being kidnapped, and we being different from the rest of European decadent weenies. Those are the only arguments that anybody on your side ever listened to. When I talked about military industrial complex or money or whatever, I could see people's eyes glazing over. They just couldn't care.
Yeah. And one final little anecdote from my end. There's this globalist guy I know. I was at the bar with him one time, and he was talking about how, if Donald Trump wins, then we're going to have to, by we, he's talking about the establishment. We're going to have to join up with China fully. And that is, I think, the huge divide in the sand where I think a lot of MAGA Americans, even if they aren't politically proficient, they can understand, probably, thanks to COVID as well, the doom scenario of having this kind of Borg hive technocratic system be in charge of your life, keeping tabs on everything you do, giving you the social credit system. And we have these European, Nazi weenies who think that, there's nothing wrong with that. This is just, the next step in human evolution. We have to go that direction. And that to me is something that I am 100% completely against. And that is going to be the big battle in the decades to come as technology advances. So I really want to I really want to thank you guys. Vlad, Vish, this has been a tremendous pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, big thank you. Big thank you to Armand. Big thank you to Joseph, of course. I hope he's going to be safe over there, with the drone bombings. And guys, if you want to support this, once again, if you're listening to this in X Spaces, look at the Jumbotron link. It says YouTube version, subscribe, the YouTube link. Click that, go into YouTube right now, add a like, subscribe, click the bell, and also patreon.com/breaktherules. We've had many amazing episodes in New York City. We had with Vladislav here and Curtis Yarvin. That was a really, really cool episode, as well as with Jason Giorgiani. Both wonderful episodes. And if you become a patron, a $20 patron, and you live in the New York City area or planning on going there, you can be in the studio as a guest audience watching it, and then we're going to go out for some drinks, or when the weather is good, we have a rooftop. Yes, Vish, I would love for you to come in the future for a show, or even, as a guest or whatever. And, it's a really, really good hang. I bring in the best, the smartest people, bringing everybody together. Vish, where could people find you, and anything you want to plug right now?
Yeah, you can find me on X at Vish Burra, Truth Social at Vish, and also you could see my work every night on One American News Network. I'm the booker and scriptwriter for the Matt Gaetz Show. So download the OAN Live app, and you'll see I
want to go on
the Ukraine.
Can you get me on there, man? I want to go.
That's not impossible, by the way. We'd certainly love to have you. Yeah.
There we go. Making it happen. All right, Vish, thank you so much. Vlad, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure.
Great pleasure, Vish. You're a gentleman of color. Great pleasure. Bye-bye.
Follow me on X at LevPo, LEVPO, and patreon.com/breaktherules. Thank you guys so much. I will see you later. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
There we go. And now the space has